Hello neighbors, it's me, Baphomette. You've summoned me to be your guide to the wonderful world of Satanism. Here, all of your questions are answered, as we prove that just because you're unholy doesn't mean you also can't be wholesome. It's that time of year again, so we're going to spell out the truth about witchcraft. It's a word we all know, but we could be more familiar with. Oxford etymologist Anatoly Lieberman says that the word witch comes from the Old English word Wicca, meaning a man practicing magic. Since English used gendered nouns in those days, we know that the earliest reference from 890 CE was specifically about a man. The feminine version of the word isn't on record until the year 1000. It might have come from an even older English word meaning to divine the future, or from a Dutch word for the neighing of horses, because the Roman historian Tacitus says that ancient Germans foretold the future by listening to a horse. Of course. In anthropologist Phillips J. Stevens' 1991 essay, The Demonology of Satanism, he writes that anthropologists use the word witchcraft to refer to the belief in a mythical power that can be used to work evil directly. In this way, it is distinct from sorcery, which is evil magic involving objects and words to affect things symbolically. This definition is not universally consistent, though. For example, in English folklore, witches often hurt people using image magic, employing a doll or a painting resembling the victim and sticking it with pins. These days, people call that a voodoo doll, but the voodoo religion doesn't really believe in any such thing. Ouch! Stevens says that almost all cultures in the world have some kind of evil spirit or sorcerer in their folk belief who performs certain taboos. He even gave us a list of the 14 evil acts commonly associated with witches around the world. Drumroll, please. Social subversion, nocturnal activity, transformation, flight, employing familiar spirits, attending secret meetings, spreading disease, abducting children, illicit sexual activity, ritual murder, ritual use of blood and body parts, cannibalism, vampirism, and consorting with death. How do you consort with death? Do you just play cards with them? People have probably always believed in magic, but witchcraft is different. Anthropologist Susan Greenwood's book, A History of Witchcraft, says that in societies where magic is common, witches are distinct in that they operate by night, work in secret, create misfortune for their neighbors, and delight in doing antisocial things. Which, I think she's just describing cats. Are witches cats? In America, our modern idea about witches come almost entirely out of European folklore and the Christianized notion that witchcraft stems from the devil. But historian John Damos, not to be confused with John Stamos, writes in his witch hunting retrospective, The Enemy Within, that the early church split over questions of whether magic was real and what kind of power the devil actually had in the world. Although magic was always imagined to be a sin, before the 13th century or so, it wasn't thought of as particularly bad. In those days, churches were more worried about persecuting heretics and Jewish people. Only later did they decide that actually witches were the biggest problem, really. You know, at some point, maybe everybody should have put all of this energy into working on themselves instead. Malleus Maleficarum, the infamous 15th century witch hunter's manual published by German inquisitors, described phantasmagorical scenes of satanic witchery. It must not be omitted that certain wicked women, perverted by Satan and seduced by the illusions and phantasms of devils, believe and profess that they ride in the night hours on certain beasts with Diana, the heathen goddess, and with a countless number of women, and that in the untimely silence of the night they travel over great distances of land. All witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women unsatiable. Let it be known that the two men who wrote this book were celibate their whole lives, which is just as well. Generally, we imagine witches being put to death by burning, but this was more common in France and continental Europe. In England and America, they hanged witches instead. Historian Stacy Schiff writes that this was a real conundrum for people in the Channel Islands who weren't sure whether it was kosher to hang or burn their witches. Their solution was to hang the witches and then burn them. Amazing that didn't catch on anywhere else. Anthropologist Margaret Murray's 1921 book, The Witch Cult in Modern Europe, argues that latter-day Europeans really did practice witchcraft, not as a satanic religion, but as a pagan, feminine-centric faith held over in secret from pre-Christian days and smeared as devil's work by vengeful priests and frightened neighbors. Subsequent research hasn't deemed Murray's conclusions very plausible, although, ironically, a lot of her work translated into the practices of some modern witches actually today. These days, when people in America use the word witch, they are probably talking about people who practice any number of neo-pagan religions, some of which may have their roots in Murray's writings. Many Satanists still enjoy identifying with the history of witch beliefs. As Satanist Johnny Truant's essay, Liberating the Satanic Feminine, points out, the witch is a powerful and appealing character. She is independent, a keeper of secret knowledge, fully capable of defending herself, and incredibly powerful. She feels no obligation to be partnered, or to be heterosexual, or to reproduce, although she feels free to do any of these things. When we think about witches, usually we end up thinking about people who are at least a little bit different from the norm, and how dangerous that can be for them. Of course, you can tell by the way I look that I never have this kind of problem, because I fit in everywhere I go. But building a world where everyone is safe from persecution takes hard work and sacrifice. So on this very special time of year, let's all take a little extra time to give some appreciation to those who came before us. Until next time, keep living deliciously.